A quiet afternoon in Central Park, the kind of peaceful day where the city's relentless hum fades into a gentle murmur. James Whitaker, a titan of industry, a man whose every decision shaped skylines and fortunes, walked hand in hand with his daughter Emily. Since his wife Claire had passed, Emily was his anchor, his reason for breathing. Their weekend walks were sacred, a fragile tether to the love he'd lost and the future he was desperately trying to build. He thought he knew every contour of his life, every joy, every sorrow. He was wrong. Suddenly a small voice, sharp with innocent conviction, sliced through the tranquility. "Daddy, that's my brother." James froze, the world tilted. He turned, narrowing his eyes at Emily, trying to find the source of such an outlandish claim. His heart, usually a steady drumbeat of calculated risks and strategic maneuvers, began to stutter. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice tighter than he intended. Emily, a whirlwind of pink dress and boundless energy, spun to face him, her cheeks flushed with the thrill of discovery. "That boy over there," she insisted, her small finger pointing decisively toward the fountain. "Sitting by the fountain, he's my brother." James's gaze snapped to where she pointed. A little boy no older than 5 sat hunched on the edge of a concrete bench, a battered cardboard box clutched to his chest as if it contained his entire world. His clothes were torn and dirty, his shoes barely clinging together. This child, so clearly from a different world, could not possibly be no. James tried to dismiss it, to rationalize, to explain away the absurdity. But then their eyes met, bright, piercing blue, the exact shade as Emily's. The exact shade as his own. A chilling sense of dread, cold and undeniable, began to spread through him. "Emily, do not say things like that," James managed, forcing a calm he didn't feel. "You don't have a brother, you only have me." But Emily, usually so compliant, stood firm, her wide eyes serious beyond her years. "No, Daddy, I know it, that's my brother, I feel it." James frowned, a deep furrow appearing between his brows. This wasn't some childish fantasy. The boy's eyes, the shape of his nose, the curve of his cheek. It was a resemblance that punched him in the gut, a haunting familiarity he couldn't ignore. His heart began to pound, a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The boy was staring back now, silent, cautious, his gaze unwavering, full of a wisdom no child should possess. Slowly, carefully, James approached him, Emily still clutching his hand, her small presence the only tether to reality. He crouched down, trying to soften his imposing height. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice a surprising rasp. "What's your name?" The boy clutched the cardboard box tighter, his lips sealed. Silence. James tried again, injecting warmth into his tone. "I'm James. This is my daughter, Emily. We were just walking through the park." The boy's intense blue eyes flickered to Emily, then back to James, a flicker of something unreadable passing between them. Then a whisper, barely audible above the distant city sounds. "Noah." "Noah," James repeated, the name tasting foreign on his tongue, yet oddly resonant. "That's a nice name. Where's your mom, Noah?" He hesitated, a strange apprehension gripping him. The boy looked down at the ground, then muttered, "At home. She's sick." James's chest tightened. Sick. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken hardship. He pushed on carefully. "Do you live far from here?" Noah's gaze dropped again. "We live in the basement apartment over on 43rd Street. Mama doesn't let me go far, but today she was sleeping too long and there wasn't any food, so I came out." The words hit James like a physical blow. Sleeping too long, no food. He tried to process it, the vast chasm between his world and this boy. "Do you have a dad?" he asked, though his voice faltered mid-sentence, dread twisting in his stomach. Noah shook his head. "Mama said he left before I was born." Dizzy, James felt truly dizzy. He tried to shake the burgeoning thought, the terrifying, impossible connection, but something in the boy's features, a certain curve of the jaw, a particular way his lips pressed together, made it impossible to ignore. His mind raced backward through the years, a desperate, frantic search for an answer he didn't want to find. 6 years ago, a woman had worked briefly in his company, a kind, shy woman named Mary Carter. Blonde hair, blue eyes, Mary Carter. The name echoed in the vast emptiness of his guilt. She had been fired under complicated circumstances, a mix-up with accounting files that had spiraled out of control. She never fought the decision, just vanished. Could it be? The thought was a searing brand, impossible to extinguish. He reached into the small backpack slung over his shoulder, the one Emily had insisted on bringing, laden with her treasures and snacks. He pulled out a wrapped sandwich, offering it to Noah with a gentleness that surprised even himself. "Here," he said softly, "you must be hungry." Noah looked at it, his eyes wide, then took it cautiously, his small fingers brushing James's. He mumbled, "Thank you," so quietly it was almost lost in the breeze. James watched the boy eat slowly, deliberately, as if afraid someone would snatch it away. There was something heartbreakingly graceful in the way he sat, his small frame hunched, like he was used to making himself invisible. Beside him, Emily, oblivious to the storm raging inside her father, sat cross-legged on the grass, a bright smile gracing her lips. "Hi, Noah," she said, her voice like chimes. "I like your eyes, they're just like mine." Noah looked at her, blinking slowly, and then a faint, fragile smile curled his lips. James's heart ached with a pain both sharp and unfamiliar. He stood up, stepping back, trying to regain his composure, trying to breathe. He glanced at Emily, then at Noah, then back again. Same eyes, same face shape. The resemblance was undeniable, a brutal mirror reflecting a past he had carelessly discarded. His hand trembled as he reached for his phone, dialing his assistant. "Monica," he said, his voice tight, strained. "I need you to find everything you can about a former employee, Mary Carter. She worked here about 6 years ago. Start with HR records, anything you can get your hands on, immediately." Monica, ever efficient, didn't ask questions. "Yes, Mr. Whitaker, I'm on it." James hung up, his gaze falling once more on the two children. Emily was showing Noah her stuffed bunny now, chatting to him like they had known each other forever. The sight was a knife twist to his gut, a stark reminder of his unforgivable neglect. He knelt down again, his voice softer, laced with an urgency he couldn't hide. "Noah," he said, "how would you feel about coming with us for a little while, just to have a good meal and make sure you're okay? Then I'll take you back to your mom." Noah stared at him for a long, silent moment, his cautious blue eyes searching James's face. Then he nodded, clutching the sandwich and his cardboard box close to his chest. James stood, lifting Emily into his arms, a familiar comfort, and placed a gentle, tentative hand on Noah's small shoulder. He didn't know what he would find, what truth lay buried in the past, or what monstrous mistakes he had made. But something told him, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that his life had just changed forever. And it all began with a little girl in a pink dress, pointing across the park, uttering words he would never, ever forget. "Daddy, that's my brother." The elevator doors slid open with a soft sigh, revealing James's penthouse, a monument to his success, a glass-clad tower soaring above Central Park. Noah hesitated at the threshold, clutching his tattered cardboard box as if it were the only thing grounding him to this bewildering new reality. "Come in, buddy," James said gently, his voice resonating with an unfamiliar tenderness. "You're safe here." Emily, unbound by the weight of the moment, darted ahead, her curls bouncing, a joyful echo of calls. "Come on, Noah, you have to see my room. It's pink and has stars on the ceiling." Noah stepped in slowly, his small frame dwarfed by the sheer scale of the space. His eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and wonder, scanned the polished marble floors, the towering windows that framed the endless city, the sparkling crystal chandelier. It was a world so far removed from the cracked sidewalks and leaky roofs of his own neighborhood that it felt like another planet. He followed Emily down the long, echoing hallway, still hugging the precious box to his chest, his small feet almost silent on the plush rugs. James watched them disappear into Emily's room, a knot forming in his stomach. Then, with a heavy sigh, he walked to his home office, a sanctuary of control and order that now felt profoundly unsettling. He sat down at his imposing mahogany desk and opened a locked cabinet. Inside, company records, documents he hadn't touched in years, symbols of a past he had systematically compartmentalized. He pulled out old employee files, their edges yellowed with time, and began flipping through them page after page, each one a stark reminder of a life he had meticulously built and perhaps destroyed, until he found it, her name, Mary Carter. He stared at the file. The photo stapled in the corner showed a young woman with golden hair and a warm, shy smile. She had been a receptionist for less than a year, a blip on his corporate radar, a forgotten face in a sea of employees. There had been a misunderstanding about a client report, one that had escalated, leading to an argument between her and a junior manager. James remembered that day vaguely, a stressful blur of deadlines and demands. He had been tired, overwhelmed, and perhaps too quick to take sides, too insulated by his own importance to truly see. He had signed the termination without asking questions, without a second thought. He never saw her again. But there had been an email, or had there been more than one, messages he had flagged for follow-up, then buried under an avalanche of contracts and board meeting agendas. Messages he never replied to. A cold dread seeped into him. She had tried to reach him, and now, horrifyingly, the pieces were falling into place. Mary Carter had left the company pregnant, alone. He found a recent address linked to her name through the company's old emergency contact form. It was in Brooklyn, an apartment in a rundown building known for cheap rentals and poor maintenance. James searched the address online, his fingers trembling, and found images of cracked walls, peeling paint, and graffiti-tagged doors. A pit, cold and vast, grew in his stomach. Noah had been telling the truth. His mother was sick. And she had been raising his son in unimaginable poverty, while James built skyscrapers and attended galas, oblivious in his gilded cage. James leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face with both hands, the weight of his past pressing down on him. Guilt, sharp and relentless, clawed at him. He hadn't just forgotten her. He had dismissed her, discarded her when she needed him most. And now there was a child, his child. He couldn't be absolutely sure, not yet, but in his heart he already knew. It was a truth as undeniable as the skyline outside his window. That night, while Emily and Noah, oblivious to the quiet storm brewing, played with brightly colored building blocks on the vast living room carpet, James made a phone call. He contacted a discreet charity organization, one known for delivering aid to struggling families without revealing donors. He gave them Mary's address. "I want a full grocery order sent," he said, his voice low, firm. "Include fruits, vegetables, meat, medicine, vitamins, cleaning supplies. No branding, no notes. Just deliver it quietly." "Understood." The representative on the other end replied, their tone professional and unblinking. "It will be there by morning." He ended the call, the receiver feeling heavy in his hand, and returned to the living room. Emily had draped a blanket over 2 chairs, creating a makeshift fort, a kingdom of innocent imagination. She crawled inside and pulled Noah in with her, giggling. "This is the castle and you're the prince," she declared, her voice ringing with pure joy. Noah smiled, a small, hesitant curve of his lips, but real. James felt a lump in his throat, the way the boy responded to kindness. The way he looked at Emily as if she were the sun. The way his shoulders relaxed just slightly when no one raised their voice. He had seen all this before, in himself, in people who had been forced to grow up too fast. James stood at the edge of the scene, silently watching, the vastness of his failure and the depth of his desire to make amends settling over him. He had to do more than send groceries. He had to face Mary, ask her the truth, tell her he was sorry, and be ready for whatever answer she gave him. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, James Whittaker felt a clarity of purpose that transcended profit margins and quarterly reports. The next morning, James dressed quietly, the apartment still hushed with the soft breathing of sleeping children. When Emily and Noah finally woke, he made them breakfast himself, pancakes, fresh strawberries, orange juice, a domestic scene that felt both alien and profoundly right. He told Emily they were going on a little adventure. Noah looked nervous, his blue eyes wide. "Are we going far?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Not too far," James replied, his tone gentle, reassuring. "Just somewhere important." He packed a small bag for the boy, including clean clothes and a new toy Emily had insisted on giving him, a small, fluffy dinosaur. As they stepped into the sleek black car, James's driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror, sensing the unusual tension emanating from his usually composed employer. "Where to, Mr. Whitaker?" he asked. James hesitated for just a second, a flicker of doubt, of fear, twisting in his gut. Then, with a resolve that hardened his jaw, he said, "Brooklyn. I'll give you the address on the way." He sat back, staring out the window as the skyline shifted, the gleaming towers slowly giving way to a different reality, wealth fading into worn brick and rusted fences, a landscape of forgotten lives. His heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat against his ribs as they neared the address. Today he would face the past. Today he would find out if the boy beside him, so innocent and fragile, was truly his son. And if he was, James vowed silently, a fierce, protective instinct rising within him, he would never let him go again. The car crawled through a narrow street, lined with graffiti-covered buildings and rusted fire escapes, a stark contrast to the manicured avenues of his everyday life. James sat silently, watching the scenery shift from sleek glass towers to crumbling brick and worn sidewalks. He had passed neighborhoods like this before, countless times, shielded by the tinted windows of his car, but today it felt personal. Every chipped window pane, every overflowing trash can, seemed to whisper stories of struggle he had been too blind to see. When they finally arrived, he stepped out, Noah by his side, the boy clutching his small bag, his eyes scanning the peeling paint and dim hallways with a familiar, weary gaze. James took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of damp concrete and forgotten dreams, and knocked on the faded green door of apartment 4B. Footsteps approached, hesitant. The door creaked open. "Mary." Her eyes, still that striking blue, widened in disbelief. Her hair was pulled back in a tired bun, her face pale and thinner than he remembered, but it still held a quiet grace, a stubborn dignity that James recognized instantly, painfully. "Noah," she gasped, her voice raw with a mixture of shock and profound relief. The boy rushed into her arms, burying his face in her clothes. "Mama," Mary clutched him, her body shaking, then looked up, her gaze meeting James's. Her voice, when it came, was cold, laced with years of unspoken pain. "James, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," he said softly, his voice betraying none of the turmoil raging within him. "Emily, my daughter, she saw Noah. She said he's her brother. I didn't believe it, but I need to know the truth." Mary's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in her cheek. "You don't get to ask questions," she stated, her voice trembling with barely suppressed fury. "Not after what you did." "Please," James pleaded, taking a small step forward, his voice a desperate whisper. "Just give me a few minutes for Noah." She held Noah even closer, her eyes blazing. "I was pregnant. I tried to tell you. I sent emails, called, but no one let me through. Then I got fired. I had nothing." James looked stunned, a genuine shock spreading across his features. "Mary, I never saw any of that, I swear." She let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "Of course you didn't. You were too busy being important. I was 24 and terrified. Then I had Noah, and I raised him alone." James's throat tightened, a burning sensation he could barely swallow past. "I'm sorry," he choked out, the words feeling utterly inadequate. "I should have asked, looked for you." Mary shook her head, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. "You don't get to show up now and play savior. Noah has a life. It's not much, but it's ours." He swallowed hard, the question burning on his tongue, demanding to be spoken. "Mary, is he my son?" She hesitated, a long, agonizing moment, the silence amplifying the frantic beating of his heart. Then, with a tear finally rolling down her cheek, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "but I don't want your money. I just want to protect him." James knelt beside her, meeting her gaze, his own eyes pleading. "I'm not here to take him away. I just want to help, to be a father." Mary's eyes were still wary, distrust etched deep. "I don't know if I can forgive you." "I understand," James said, his voice raw with unspoken remorse, "but please let me try." He reached into his coat and placed a thick, sealed envelope on the chipped counter. "This isn't for forgiveness," he clarified, his voice gentle. "It's for Noah, rent, medicine, food. Basic needs. I'll come back tomorrow." Mary picked up the envelope, her fingers trembling slightly. The hardness in her gaze, a protective shield she had worn for years, faded just a fraction. James added softly, almost as an afterthought, "Will you let me take a DNA test, just to be sure?" She hesitated again, her eyes searching his, weighing the risks, the implications. Then she nodded, a barely perceptible movement. "Fine," she said, her voice still strained, "but no promises." James stood, a glimmer of fragile hope rising within him. "That's all I ask." He looked at Noah, who, still holding his mother's hand, now stared at James with a cautious, innocent curiosity. James reached out, gently touched Noah's shoulder. "I'll see you soon, okay?" Noah gave a small nod, and then without warning he stepped forward, a tiny figure, and hugged James's leg for just a moment, a simple gesture that shattered James's composure. Mary said nothing, her eyes fixed on her son. As James walked down the hall, his heart heavier than ever with the weight of his past, he felt something else rise inside it. Hope, pure, undeniable hope. The envelope trembled in James's hand as he stood in his office, staring out over the glittering Manhattan skyline. He had read it 3 times, each word searing itself into his brain, yet the revelation still hit him like a physical wave. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. Noah was his son. His breath exhaled slowly, a long, shaky sigh that carried years of unspoken regret and dawning responsibility. He looked at the photo on his desk, Emily grinning in her pink dress, her laughter almost audible in the quiet room. He picked up his phone. The world was about to change again. 2 hours later, Noah stood at the threshold of James's penthouse, not as a tentative guest, but as family. A small, tentative smile played on his lips. Emily, a burst of unrestrained joy, ran to him, her voice ringing with delight. "Noah, you're back. You're my big brother now, for real." She tugged him excitedly into the living room, a blur of pink and enthusiasm. "This is your room now, or we can build another fort." James watched them quietly, a rare, profound peace settling in his chest, a warmth he hadn't realized was missing. For a fleeting moment, he allowed himself to breathe, to bask in the simple joy of this new, unexpected family. But the moment was short-lived. His phone began to buzz incessantly, a relentless assault. News had broken. Millionaire has secret love child. James Whittaker's hidden past exposed. Whittaker heir found in Brooklyn's slums. Paparazzi swarmed his building, a ravenous pack. His office was overwhelmed with calls, his PR team in a panic. The board of directors demanded an emergency call, their voices sharp with barely concealed anger. "You should have handled this privately, James," Leonard Chase, a senior board member, stated, his voice clipped and cold, devoid of sympathy. "This is damaging, our stocks are slipping." James's jaw tightened. He straightened his shoulders, his voice firm, unwavering. "This isn't a scandal, Leonard, it's my son." Another board member, his face pinched with disdain, chimed in. "You're risking our reputation, James. What about our investors?" James's voice sharpened, cutting through their corporate anxieties. "If being a father is a risk, gentlemen, maybe we need to rethink what we stand for." He ended the call, the click echoing in the silent office, and stared out the window, the city lights a mocking reflection of the storm he had just unleashed. Back inside, Noah was quiet, polite, but withdrawn. He sat alone during meals, spoke little, and often stared at the door, a silent vigil, waiting for a mother who wasn't coming tonight. James saw it all. The subtle tension in Noah's shoulders, the way his eyes darted around, the unasked questions in his silence. Money could build safety, but it couldn't build trust. It couldn't build love, not yet. That evening, James tried something different. He knew grand gestures wouldn't work. It had to be small, real. "Noah," he said gently, kneeling beside him, trying to bridge the chasm of their unfamiliarity. "How about we make pizza tonight, just us, me, you, and Emily?" Noah blinked, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Make it," James nodded, a tentative smile forming. "From scratch, everything." Emily clapped, her usual boundless enthusiasm reigniting. "I want pepperoni flowers again." They rolled dough, made a glorious mess with flour, and decorated pizzas with olive smiles and abstract pepperoni art. For the first time, not just that day, but perhaps in years, genuine laughter filled the kitchen. The penthouse, usually a cold monument to ambition, finally felt like home. After dinner, James brought out a gleaming red bicycle, identical to Emily's, which was propped against the wall. "This is for you," he said softly, offering it. "You and your sister are a team now. Brothers and sisters have to ride together." Noah stared at it, then at James, his small face unreadable. He didn't speak, but he nodded, his lips curling into the smallest, most real smile James had seen yet. A flicker of warmth, a fragile seed of connection, had finally taken root. Across the city, in her Stark apartment, Mary sat on her couch, endlessly scrolling through news articles. Images of James with Noah were everywhere, splashed across every tabloid and news outlet. Her chest tightened, a familiar pain mixing with a new, unsettling emotion. He looked genuine, but could he really have changed? Could the man who had discarded her so easily now truly care? Her phone buzzed, vibrating against her thigh. A text message from James Whittaker. "Mary, I know this is a lot, but I want to do this right, for Noah and for you. Please come visit, no pressure. Let's figure this out together." She read it again and again, the words echoing in the silent apartment. Then she set the phone down. She remembered endless nights rocking Noah to sleep, wondering if she had made the right choice, keeping him away from a father who didn't even know he existed. But now that man, the one who broke her heart, had faced the media storm, had accepted Noah publicly, and had stood firm against the sharks on his board. Maybe, just maybe. In the penthouse, Noah and Emily were curled up under a blanket, a cartoon flickering on the television screen. Noah's head rested gently on Emily's shoulder, a picture of quiet contentment. James stepped out onto the balcony, the cool night air a balm against his conflicted mind. He had failed before spectacularly, but he would not fail again. Tomorrow Mary would come and he would be ready to face her anger, her pain, and perhaps, just perhaps, begin to build something real. The next morning, Mary stepped out of the elevator, her hands clenched tightly around the strap of her worn purse. The penthouse doors opened, revealing the warmth and light inside, a stark contrast to the sterile chrome of the elevator. Laughter echoed from the living room, Emily's bright giggles, punctuated by Noah's quiet chuckles. She hesitated, a wave of apprehension washing over her. James greeted her with a soft, gentle smile, a warmth in his eyes that disarmed her slightly. "Mary," he said, his voice calm and steady, "thank you for coming." She nodded stiffly, her gaze unwavering. "I'm here for Noah." James simply stepped aside, letting her in without another word, a silent acknowledgement of her boundary. Noah was sprawled on the floor beside Emily, both children surrounded by a colorful chaos of puzzle pieces and crayons. He looked up, his face lighting up with unbridled joy. "Mama," he called, scrambling to his feet and running into her arms. Mary knelt, hugging him tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her son. "How are you, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "I like it here," he said, pulling back slightly, his eyes sparkling. "Emily's funny, we're drawing planets." Mary smiled faintly, a genuine albeit fleeting smile, but her eyes flicked toward James, still wary, still guarded. As the children resumed their play, James quietly offered her a cup of tea and motioned toward the sitting area, an oasis of plush sofas and soft lighting. "Can we talk?" he asked. She sat down, her posture rigid, a fortress of caution around her. "I've made arrangements," James began, keeping his tone calm, carefully measured, "for your medical treatment. I spoke with the physician at the Ridgeway Center. You'll have access to anything you need, no cost to you." Mary stiffened, her jaw tightening. "I didn't ask for your charity, James." "I know," he said gently, his gaze unwavering. "This isn't charity, it's the least I can do, for what I took from you, for the years you suffered." She looked away, silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air between them. "I also spoke to a partner company," he continued, giving her space. "They have an opening in their communications team. If you're interested, it's yours, no obligations, just an opportunity." Mary raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "So now I owe you a job, too?" "No," James said, his voice firm, kind. "You owe me nothing, I just want to help. You deserve a life that isn't built on surviving." Mary stared at him, conflicted. She had imagined this meeting would be filled with pretense, with hollow words, with manipulative gestures. But instead, here he was, not asking for her forgiveness, not demanding anything, just quietly trying to fix what had been broken, acknowledging the profound injustice he had inadvertently caused. Later that evening, while she watched Noah play with Emily, a scene of unexpected harmony, something remarkable happened. Noah was building a towering structure of blocks. It toppled over with a clatter, and Emily giggled. James bent down, his powerful frame folding effortlessly to the floor to help him rebuild it. "Want to try again?" he asked, his voice warm, encouraging. Noah looked up at him, and without thinking, without hesitation, he said softly, "Okay, Dad." James froze, so did Mary. The world seemed to stop spinning. Noah, oblivious to the moment he had created, simply continued stacking blocks, his small hands carefully placing one on top of another. James swallowed hard, his throat tight with a rush of emotion. He did not speak, could not speak, but his eyes met Mary's across the room, shimmering with unshed emotion, a silent, profound understanding passing between them. Mary said nothing. She simply watched them, her heart aching with a mixture of pain, tenderness, and a fragile, burgeoning hope. The next morning, as she gathered her things to leave, her movements slow and deliberate, she found a small, exquisitely wrapped box placed on the side table with a simple, elegant note. She opened it. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a pendant, an engraved disc with two names etched into the surface, Noah and Emily. The note, in James's distinctive handwriting, read, "So you always remember that whatever happens between us, we are still a family because of them." Her hands trembled as she closed the box, the weight of the necklace a physical manifestation of the unspoken promise. She walked into the kitchen where James stood, already preparing breakfast with the kids, a domestic scene that felt incredibly normal, incredibly wrong, and yet powerfully right. She cleared her throat, drawing his attention. "James," she said quietly, "I heard about my mother's hospital bill, the one that got paid last week." James looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, but no denial. "I didn't tell you she was sick," Mary continued, her voice catching, "but you found out, and you helped." "I did not want to make a show of it, Mary," James said, his gaze steady, sincere. "I just wanted to help her get better." Mary's voice cracked, tears welling in her eyes. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because I failed you once," James said, his voice raw with a profound regret, "and I will spend the rest of my life trying not to fail you again." Mary stood still for a long time, the weight of his words settling over her, dismantling years of carefully constructed walls. Then she nodded slowly, a decision blooming in her heart. "Noah can stay here for a while," she said, her voice still quiet but firm. "He seems happy, he deserves that." "And you?" James asked gently, not pushing, just offering. "I do not know yet," she replied honestly, her vulnerability exposed. "But I am willing to give you a chance to show me." James smiled, a genuine, relieved smile, not pushing for more, simply accepting the small, precious offering of her trust. That evening, as she left, Noah ran to the door and hugged her tightly, his small arms wrapped around her waist. "I will be okay, Mama," he said, his voice muffled against her clothes. "We're a team now." She kissed his forehead, a silent promise. "Always." As the elevator doors closed behind her, Mary held the necklace in her hand, her fingers brushing over the names, Noah and Emily, a symbol of a family she never knew she had, of a healing that was, perhaps, finally beginning. Noah's first day of school came with a mix of excitement and quiet dread. For Emily, it was another grand adventure. Proudly wearing her pink backpack, she held Noah's hand tightly as they walked into the bustling classroom, chatting endlessly, unbothered by the sea of new faces. Noah, though, felt the eyes on him, a prickling sensation on his skin. Whispers started even before the bell rang. Some kids noticed his shoes were slightly older, his backpack simpler, an unspoken mark of difference. One boy, a self-important smirk on his face, sneered, "Hey, is that the kid from the news? The one who lived in the slums?" A few others giggled, the sound sharp and cruel. Noah's shoulders stiffened. He lowered his gaze, silent, a familiar ache of invisibility settling over him. Then Emily spun around, her eyes flashing with a fury that belied her small stature. She stood right in front of the boy, tiny fists balled at her sides, her voice louder than expected for a 3-year-old, ringing with absolute conviction. "You stop it," she declared firmly. "Noah is my brother, he's the best, and you're mean." The entire classroom fell silent, every eye on the tiny girl who dared to defy the unspoken social order. Noah looked up at her, stunned, a flicker of wonder in his blue eyes. Emily, as if nothing extraordinary had happened, simply turned and grabbed his hand again, smiling brightly. From that moment, the subtle teasing faded, and Noah found a quiet sense of safety, an unshakable shield, beside his fiercely loyal little sister. At home, James and Mary, navigating the delicate dance of co-parenting, worked together to help Noah through his transition. They sat at the dining table in the evenings, a comfortable, almost domestic tableau, going over homework, their heads bent close together. On weekends, they took the kids to the park, a new family ritual where Emily insisted they all ride the carousel together, a dizzying circle of shared laughter. James packed snacks, Mary brought juice. And for the first time in years, they moved as one unit, a nascent family forming its own unique rhythm. Some moments were small, barely perceptible, yet quietly profound, like when James handed Mary a sweater during a chilly afternoon, his fingers brushing hers, or when she, without thinking, adjusted his tie before a school event, a gesture of comfortable familiarity. The rhythm of co-parenting brought familiarity, and familiarity, slowly, cautiously, warmed into something gentler, something akin to trust. Then came the parent-teacher night. The classroom was decorated with crayon drawings, a vibrant explosion of childish imagination. Parents mingled in clusters, exchanging polite pleasantries and veiled boasts. James stood beside Mary, both listening attentively to Noah's teacher, a kind woman who spoke of Noah's quiet intelligence and artistic flair. Suddenly, a woman with designer heels and a sharp, brittle tone approached, her gaze sweeping over Mary with a condescending smile. "I suppose it must be strange for someone like you to be here," the woman said, addressing Mary directly, her voice dripping with thinly veiled disdain. "You know, not everyone fits in at schools like this." Mary stiffened, her jaw tightening, a familiar pain flashing in her eyes. James stepped forward, his body subtly shielding Mary. His voice, usually calm and composed, was now firm, edged with a steel that few dared to challenge. "Excuse me," the woman blinked, clearly startled by James's unexpected intervention. "I meant no offense, of course," she stammered, her composure cracking. "It's just, well, some people come from very different circumstances." James placed a protective hand on Mary's back, a silent assertion of their unity. His voice, though still calm, resonated with a quiet power. "Mary is the mother of my son. She raised him with strength and love under impossible conditions, and I respect her more than anyone else in this room." The woman faltered, her face paling, then turned away without another word, melting into the crowd. Mary stood frozen for a moment, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, overwhelmed by James's public defense, his fierce loyalty. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, I did," James replied, his hand still resting gently on her back, "because it's true." A few days later, James organized a family picnic in Central Park. He packed a basket full of handmade sandwiches, crisp apple slices, and juice boxes, a simple, wholesome meal. They laid out a blanket beneath a wide, ancient tree, its branches spreading like welcoming arms. Emily and Noah chased each other across the sun-dappled grass, their laughter like music, while James and Mary watched from the sidelines, their own smiles soft and contented. James tossed a ball to Noah, who caught it with a triumphant grin, his eyes sparkling. Emily clapped and cheered, spinning in circles, a pink blur of happiness. Mary, sitting nearby, couldn't help but smile, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached her eyes. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, Emily walked back, her cheeks flushed with exertion, her small body tired but content. She climbed into Mary's lap, snuggling close, and wrapped her tiny arms around her. "My mommy is gone," Emily said, her voice soft, innocent. "But you're really nice. Can you be my mommy, too?" Mary's breath caught in her throat. She looked down at the child in her arms, innocent, warm, and utterly sincere. The question, so simple, so profound, pierced her heart in ways she had not expected, shattering years of emotional armor. "I miss having a mommy," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I like you." Tears welled in Mary's eyes, hot and sharp. She held Emily close, her heart aching with a mixture of bittersweet grief and overwhelming love. That evening, as they packed up to leave, Mary walked beside James, quieter than usual, her thoughts swirling. He glanced at her, sensing the shift in her mood. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded slowly. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice soft, introspective, "about what's best for Noah and for Emily." James listened patiently, his gaze fixed on the setting sun, giving her the space she needed. "I want to move closer," she said. "Maybe not here, but near enough that the kids can be together easily. It will make things easier for everyone." James smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile. "I think that's a great idea, Mary, a really great idea." They walked in silence for a moment more, the gentle breeze rustling the leaves above them, carrying away the remnants of the day. Then Mary added, her voice a little stronger, a little more resolute, "And maybe we can talk more about the past, about everything." James looked over at her, his heart swelling with a quiet gratitude. The wind rustled the trees around them, a soft, encouraging whisper. "I'd like that, Mary, very much." Together they walked forward, not as two people divided by time and mistakes, but as two parents, slowly, painstakingly, rediscovering trust, healing, and something that finally resembled hope. The weeks passed quietly, beautifully. In the rhythm of shared breakfasts and bedtime stories, of school pickups and weekend adventures, James and Mary found a new closeness. It wasn't born of duty or obligation, but of genuine trust, slowly, carefully built from shared vulnerability. They spoke honestly, laughed more easily, and most importantly, raised two children who, in their innocence and boundless affection, mended what had once been broken. Noah and Emily were now inseparable. They called each other brother and sister, as if they always had, as if no chasm of time or circumstance had ever separated them. One afternoon, Mary found them hunched over a giant sheet of paper spread across the living room floor, paintbrushes clutched in their small hands, their faces smudged with brilliant colors. "What are you working on?" she asked, kneeling beside them, her heart overflowing. Emily beamed, her eyes sparkling with pride. "Our family picture." "That's you and Daddy and Noah and me and Mr. Snuggles, too." Mary smiled, her eyes softening, blurring slightly at the colorful, chaotic masterpiece, a vibrant testament to their burgeoning family. That night, James carefully hung the painting in the hallway, a place of honor where everyone could see it. "This belongs here," he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. As their bond deepened, a cautious optimism began to replace the lingering apprehension. One evening, James turned to Mary over steaming mugs of coffee, the quiet hum of the city a distant backdrop. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice hesitant but hopeful. "Maybe we should live together again, all of us, as a family." Mary hesitated, her eyes searching his. "James," she whispered, the question hanging in the air. "I know it's a lot," he added quickly, sensing her apprehension, her fierce need for independence. "It's just we're already doing all this, aren't we, as a family?" "I appreciate it," she said gently, her voice soft, "truly. But I've fought hard for my independence. I'm not ready to give that up, not yet." James nodded, understanding. "I understand, Mary, completely." She smiled, a warmth in her eyes that reached his own. "But if the offer to help with the bakery still stands—" "It does," he said, instantly, unequivocally. "Absolutely, more than ever." He found a cozy space near the kids' school, a charming corner storefront, and handled all the paperwork quietly, efficiently, letting Mary lead every step of the way. She chose the name, meticulously planned the menu, agonized over the tile colors. What she didn't know was what James had named the shop behind the scenes, a secret he held close to his heart. At the grand opening, balloons fluttered merrily. Neighbors lined up down the block, and Noah and Emily, beaming with pride, handed out warm, freshly baked cookies in matching miniature aprons. Mary stepped outside, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support, and looked up at the sign above the door. Her breath caught. The sign read, "Lukia's Dream." Lukia, her late mother's name. The one who had believed in her baking, who had dreamed of this for her, who'd wanted nothing more than to see her daughter smile again. Tears welled in Mary's eyes, hot and unexpected. James stepped beside her, his hand gently touching her arm. "I wanted to honor her," he said softly. "And you?" Mary could only nod, moved beyond words, the fragile hope she carried blossoming into full, vibrant bloom. That night after the last guests had gone and the kids were finally dozing, exhausted but happy, on the bakery bench, something unexpected happened. Noah developed a fever. It rose quickly, his small body burning. Mary panicked, her carefully constructed composure dissolving into fear, but James stayed calm, his presence a steady anchor. He helped cool Noah's skin with damp cloths, whispering reassurances, his voice low and soothing. They stayed by his side all night, a silent, unified vigil. Mary held Noah's hand, her fingers intertwined with his. James wrapped an arm around her, drawing her closer, a comforting weight. Together they waited. Just before dawn, Noah stirred, his eyes fluttering open, clouded with fever but lucid. "Are you both staying?" he whispered, his voice thin. "We're right here, buddy," James said, his voice thick with relief. Noah reached out, his small hand holding both their hands, a fragile bridge between them. "I want you to stay together," he murmured, his eyes fixed on their faces. "I want us to be a family." They didn't speak. They just looked at each other, a profound, quiet understanding passing between them, a promise made without words. Later, after the fever finally broke and Noah was deep in the restorative sleep of a child recovering, Mary leaned into James, her head resting against his shoulder. "I've been so scared," she whispered, her voice raw, "to trust again, to let anyone in, but I see now you've changed, you truly have." "I had to," James said, his voice raspy, holding her closer. "For him, for you." Mary closed her eyes, tears silently tracing paths down her cheeks. "For us," she whispered. Then her voice stronger, a newfound resolve blooming. Maybe we can try again, slowly, one day at a time." "One day at a time," James whispered, taking her hand, intertwining their fingers. As morning light spilled across the bakery sign, Lukia's dream, it glowed softly like a promise, a beacon of hope. Inside, a family was beginning again, whole, healing, and finally at peace. 1 year later, the Whittaker household had settled into a quiet rhythm of joy, far from the relentless noise and blinding glare of the city. They now lived in a warm, sunlit home, nestled in the leafy suburbs of New York, a place where laughter wasn't a luxury but a constant presence. The yard was always scattered with toys, bright chalk drawings on the pavement, and the exuberant sounds of children at play. A white picket fence bordered the garden where Emily, with her boundless energy, had proudly planted sunflowers, their cheerful faces following the sun. Noah, ever the quiet observer, kept a small patch dedicated to tomatoes, insisting he wanted to grow real food like at the bakery. Mary's bakery, Lukia's dream, was thriving, a beloved fixture in the community. Every morning, locals lined up, eager for her famous cinnamon rolls and the delicate tang of her lemon tarts. The walls of the shop were now filled with a vibrant collection of crayon drawings from neighborhood children, including many from Emily and Noah, who spent their afternoons there doing homework, occasionally sneaking extra cookies, and absorbing the scent of warm bread and happy customers. James had remarkably stepped back from the relentless helm of his empire. He still attended key meetings, his sharp mind ever present, but his schedule now largely orbited around school pickups, bedtime stories, and impromptu dance parties in the kitchen, moments he cherished more than any corporate triumph. Noah and Emily had become inseparable. They built elaborate forts that spanned entire rooms, raced bikes down the sidewalk with joyful shouts, and painted wild, colorful murals in the garage. To them there had never been a before, only this beautiful now, where they were simply brother and sister, heart and soul, their lives inextricably woven together. On a golden September afternoon, under a sky painted with hues of orange and purple, James and Mary hosted a small, intimate celebration in their backyard. The picnic table was decorated with wildflowers, their delicate petals swaying in the gentle breeze, and soft music played from a speaker tucked discreetly beneath the porch. Friends from the bakery, a few trusted neighbors, and close family gathered to celebrate the anniversary of the day everything changed, the day they all became one family. James, relaxed and genuinely happy, grilled while Mary brought out her signature strawberry shortcake, a mountain of fresh berries and whipped cream. Emily danced around in a pink tutu, a tiny ballerina of pure joy, while Noah, with his newfound confidence, helped set the table, carefully arranging the plates with a quiet focus. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the scene, James tapped his glass with a spoon, drawing everyone's attention. "Thank you all for being here," he said, his voice filled with an emotion that transcended his usual composure. "A year ago, I had no idea that my life was about to change forever, but it did, in the best possible way. And today I want to celebrate the heart of our home, our family." Mary smiled beside him, her eyes glowing with a quiet, profound happiness. Just then Noah and Emily came running forward, their faces alight with a shared secret. "We have a surprise," Emily squealed, practically vibrating with excitement. They handed their parents a large, carefully folded piece of paper, its edges soft from being clutched by small hands. When James opened it, his breath caught in his chest, a wave of tenderness washing over him. It was a drawing, crayon strokes full of color and feeling. 4 figures, unmistakably them, holding hands beneath a setting sun. Above them, in wobbly, earnest letters, it read, "Our family forever." Mary's hand found James's, their fingers intertwining, and their eyes met, no words needed, the depth of their shared journey reflected in that silent gaze. James leaned down, kissed the top of each child's head, a gesture of boundless love, then turned to Mary, his eyes shining. "There's something I want to give you," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. From his pocket, he took out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of satin, was a delicate silver ring, beautifully engraved with 4 names: James, Mary, Noah, Emily. "This is not a proposal, Mary," he said, his voice husky, his gaze unwavering. "This is a promise. A promise that I will always be here, for all of you, no matter what." Mary's eyes filled with tears, sparkling in the fading light. She slipped the ring onto her finger, her hand trembling slightly, holding his gaze, a promise silently exchanged. "Then I promise the same," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. As twilight settled over the yard, a soft, ethereal light, the family sat on the porch swing together. The children leaned against their parents, their eyes drooping from the long, joyful day, finally succumbing to sleep. Laughter, soft and contented, echoed from the garden as fireflies blinked in the gathering dusk, tiny jewels in the deepening twilight. James looked around, his heart full, overflowing with a peace he had once thought impossible. "We may have lost each other once," he said, his voice a low, rumbling contentment, "but we're never letting go again." Mary nodded, her head resting against his shoulder, her hand tracing the names on the ring. "Never." And so the story ended, not with grand gestures or dramatic pronouncements, but with something far greater, a family whole, forgiven, and finally, truly unbreakable. Under the fading light of a gentle sky, they simply held on to one another, a silent testament to the enduring truth that love, real love, always finds its way home. Thank you for watching this deeply moving journey of love, redemption, and second chances. James, Mary, Noah, and Emily remind us that no matter how broken the past may be, forgiveness and compassion can build a future worth fighting for. If this story touched your heart, do not forget to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to Deep Diaries for more real-life inspired tales that heal, inspire, and bring warmth to your soul. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that remind us what it truly means to be family. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, take care and keep your heart open.